Hey! Oh, good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
depending
of
on
the
what
above,
time zone.
right?
Yeah, coming to you from around the world today.
Yeah, all over the place.
How are you,
Oh,
Sue?
I'm good. How are you? It's a lovely sunny day in the UK. It doesn't just rain.
Wow, is that very unusual?
Yes. Yeah, anyone in the UK that's listening will know we've had so much rain. It's just ridiculous. But it's sunny now. Friday afternoon and it's sunny.
oh,
Good,
how
good.
wonderful. Got big plans for the weekend?
Um, not I've been poorly, so I'm recovering, but I'm also planning. I'm speaking at Sequel Bits, so I've got the second half of my session to plan out, and a little bit of running, a little bit of running.
A little bit of
Okay.
running. That's right. We are saying you're a runner. You run marathons, right?
Yeah, I've got Vienna in April, so Vienna
Wow.
Marathon in April.
Wow.
I know.
I like watching other people run marathons. So
I
I could
like
cheer you
running
on.
them.
I can't do them.
Uh, yeah, but you get to eat lots and drink lots if you run them.
I've
So
heard that from people before, right? Yeah, like why do you
yeah.
run so much? So I could drink a lot and eat a lot afterwards, or
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
yeah.
especially marathon training. You have to eat while you're running as well.
Mhm.
So that's quite
Well,
cool. Like that.
looks
Oh,
like there's some
Christiana
good
is going
pairing.
to be at Bits.
Yay!
March is
Oh,
going to be a
awesome.
busy, busy month. A lot going on
Mm,
in March.
yeah, you got the fabric conference, haven't you, in Vegas?
Yep.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
the Fabric Conference. Chris will be speaking there. I'm going to
Oh,
Yep.
be there. I think a lot of people will be there, right? So,
And
oh,
if you see, if you get me there, I've got exclusive Fabric Conference, no Dax columns stickers. So tweet
oh.
out or post on LinkedIn. A tweet. We'll just keep it tweeting. Hashtag no Dax columns and find me in Vegas, and I'll get you your own exclusive stickers. So
Is it always Vegas every year?
this
this
is
is
the
the
first
first
one.
time.
So yes,
So,
always.
yeah.
Just seemed very tempting, doesn't it? Can you imagine?
Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know how some people are going to do it because it's the MVP conference
Yes.
in the like first
Yeah.
week or second week or whatever, then the Sequel Bits conference, then
Yeah.
the Fabric conference. Like,
Yeah.
okay, just like don't have a home for 3 weeks. That seems
Well,
crazy.
yeah, Laura Graham Brown's doing all three, but she's got it. She's been very clever. Her husband's coming to Sequel Bits, so she
Oh,
gets to see
smart,
him at Sequel Bits.
smart.
Mm.
Now
Mm.
for Sue, we go way back to SML days.
Yeah.
You want to and we still are on SML Saturday Morning Live. For those of you who don't know, fantastic group. Uh, we every Saturday morning get together, talk about the different things in the fabric landscape. But Sue, do you want to give an introduction to our audience so that
Yes.
introduce
So,
yourself?
yes. Hi, I'm Sue. I live in the Power BI development phase. I've got my own business. I'm based in the UK. I'm a citizen developer, and I've taught myself Python and R and DAX to a degree, SQL to a degree, and I just love anything to do with data. So my business primarily deals in offering business solutions to the smaller businesses, but I'm also qualified as a lecturer in business and computing, and find that the ability to think in both camps, business and computing, really helps. And I'm moving sort of more to 50-50 training and development. So I've got some exciting new business that I'm partaking in that has to do with fabric.
Well, that is
Nice.
absolutely fantastic. Congratulations, Sue. That's
Yeah,
great.
I'm really excited for it. So it's great because I mean, the fabric is just fabulous because you can just use Python in it without having your own Python environment, and
Hmm.
it just makes it so much easier to actually get
When you're
started.
not running on your local laptop
Yeah,
and
none
not
of that
having to worry about,
environment
yep,
or
yep.
path.
But you
Yeah,
can if you want to.
you
So,
can.
but
Yeah, you can.
You
Because when
can.
I first started learning,
Mhm.
I learned Python to teach to teach computer science with, because in the UK we use Python as our programming language for sort of 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds. Oh, it's Jack.
Okay.
Jack.
Hey, Jack.
And so that's how I learned Python. Then when I learned Python and learned about pandas and data, oh yeah, yoga too, Christian. Hello. Faces there, familiar names. So I started learning I started using DataCamp years ago, and it was fabulous. It took you through this whole scenario of how you could use Python and how you could use R, but it was very much in a sandbox situation. So when you then pulled it out to try and run on your own machine, you then had all the issues of having to download the software and set up pathways and what environment, and it that was a bit of a barrier to learning and could be quite frustrating. But to be able to use Python in Fabric within minutes it's just brilliant.
It's absolutely fantastic, right? And today you're going to be teaching us how to learn Python, right?
Yes, so I'll take you through some of the basic syntax and structure and to help you with Python, because obviously once you know the basics, you can talk to ChatGPT and it can help you with all of your coding, and obviously we've got Data Wrangler as well. But I just have to say, your session with Shabnam Watson on Wednesday, is it Wednesday? It was absolutely brilliant. She covered such in-depth technical content in such a clear and concise way. I was spellbound.
She did a fantastic job, and if you want to check it out, it is on my channel. You can go see that. So go ahead and flip over there after this, right?
Yes, don't do it now. Don't do it now. Different things, but I was spellbound. She's so brilliant.
Yeah. All right, let's get to it, because I know you got a lot to cover and we have limited time. So a couple ground rules.
Okay.
Number one, please prefix any questions with a Q. We want to help you. We want to answer any questions that you got. In this case, I'm going to have a lot of questions because I'm not a good Python user. Everything I know with Python, I learned with Copilot. So, I mean, I guess I know that. So I know how to use Copilot to do Python. So I'll be asking questions, but prefix questions with a Q and don't spam anything. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. We got a good community here. We shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, just interrupt me. You know I like to chat in my chaotic way, Kevin.
Awesome.
We'll get into that another time.
Yeah.
Right. And we do have a question of the day that I'd like to get feedback from everyone in the chat. Just type in on a scale of 1 to 10, how proficient are you with Python? Like, if you're a Python master, put in 10. If you thought Python was a snake and you're interested to see how Sue handles snakes today, you're going to be in for a big shock, because I don't think we're going to see any snakes coming out today.
No snakes today.
Yeah. So put in a 1 if you're in that camp. I'm a firm 2. So I know it's not a snake. I don't know much more than that. So, but please put in chat.
I'm going to go with like a 5 for me. I've been learning quite a bit of it. I've done some things with it, but we'll see what Sue comes out with. My number might be lower afterwards, or I'll learn from her. Hopefully it'll go up, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We could ask again at the end to see if anybody's numbers goes higher.
Yes.
Let's see if somebody hits 11.
Yeah. Why not? It's Friday. It's Friday. It can be 11 if you want to. It goes
up to 11 because it's louder.
Yeah. It's a good job I'm not going to Vegas, really, isn't it? I think there'd be trouble.
Oh, there'll be trouble.
Yeah. And then whatever happens stays there. All right, let's get to it.
Okay, so quick one, Python for data analysis, that's me. As we said, I run my own business. I'm an independent Power BI developer. My main passions are data, running, and yoga, and my dog. I love my dog and my family. And please connect with me if you'd like to connect with me. That's my little QR for LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn and love chatting and sharing and sharing knowledge. That's my business. Oh yeah, I also run Devon and Cornwall Meetup Group. We meet every Tuesday at 6 o'clock UK time, and we've got some fab speakers coming up. And I'm speaking at SQL Bits on Wednesday, all about Python, Thursday about Tablet Editor, which is one of my main loves as well. And then on Friday, I'm doing a fun thing with a Tablet Editor guy. So wait and see what that's about. So session plan for today is we're going to be talking about some of the basics of Python, just so you can understand the structure and how to get used to using it, and then you can have your back and forth chats with Copilot or ChatGPT or whichever choice of yours you'd like to use. Then we'll talk a little bit about the libraries, do some data cleaning, and a bit of visualization with Matplotlib. And obviously, we'll see how we go, but feel free to ask questions. I can't see the chat, but Chris or Kevin will stop me, and I don't mind being stopped.
Yeah, we got you covered.
You got me covered, thank you. I hate it when I'm out here on my own. It always gets it's a bit lonely. So first of all, what is Python? It's a snake, but we hear Python all the time. Python this, Python that, PySpark, Pandas, NumPy. It's basically a tool that we can use to solve a whole range of problems, not just data problems, but we can create websites, we can create apps, we can use it for artificial intelligence. In the UK, we use it to program little Raspberry Pis, and we can switch lights on and off so you can see programs working. The brilliant thing about Python is it has libraries. And libraries are just basically groups of functions dedicated to a certain area that we pull into Python, and then you can use this within your code. Why is it so popular? It's because it's actually really quite easy to learn and to use, so that you can start and you can get up and running quite quickly, particularly now when you start using things like Fabric or Google Colab. So before we start, let's get straight into it. And what I'll do is I'll just pull over my screen so I can show you how I get started. Bear with me 1 second. So over here.
Did you see that comment? Yeah.
Yoga and data. So a data stretcher.
What's that? Sorry? Data, you commenting on my accent already?
No. Enterprise AR was talking about being in yoga and data, so you're a data stretcher, which is really important for Fabric, because you got to stretch the fabric out, right? So
well, yes, and we have a thing called fascia in yoga, which is all the things that surround your ligaments and tendons. You have to stretch that as well. Fascia, fabric, it's all interrelated. So the brilliant thing about Fabric is that, you've got Fabric Friday, so I'm sure many of your users are well versed in Fabric, but you can just pull data into it really quickly. So there are so many different ways, but the one that I'm going to show you today is using OneLake. So you download OneLake for File Explorer, and you end up with this lovely little OneLake which sits in your File Explorer, which is really brilliant. And then what you can do is you can sync it from OneLake to your machine, and it's from Fabric into OneLake. So you can see these are my workspaces in Power BI / Fabric that have got a library in it. Now, if I come through to my Power BI instance, which is here, you should have it here. You can see I've got my normal little Power BI. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new workspace. And I'm going to call it, guess what, Fabric Friday. So create my workspace just for you. And then I am going to create a lakehouse. And we're going to call this Fabric Friday, no spaces. We're going to create it, and it's that simple. We've got our little library in our lakehouse, and we have our tables and we have our files. Now, I want to just pull a CSV file into my files. So if I go back to and there are obviously different ways to do this. You can see these are my workspaces. If I now go into OneLake and sync from OneLake, you'll see Fabric Friday turned up like that, so quick. So in here, I've got my files, and thanks to Shaban, I've got so much more detailed knowledge about the difference between files and tables and V Delta files and all sorts. So it's brilliant. So copy, and I'm now going to paste this into my OneLake Explorer. So now, if I click on Files and refresh, you will see.
It still just amazes me, like all of this in less than
I know.
5 minutes to stay in this all right. Just
Yeah, and
how valuable that is, but you know.
Well, I remember when I first started Data Camp and trying to move from the safe environment where you do all your code with your sets and everything to trying to do it on my local machine. And I just rocking back and forth because I couldn't work out the environment and the pathway. Then you have to go into your paths, and you know, for a beginner, that's quite advanced going into your computer setup.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to open up a new netbook, and you can see I've got my files and my HR file there. And
Chris, can we go back to the screen?
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So you can see in here my Fabric Friday. What I did is I just opened a new workbook, and if we click on Lake Houses and we click on Files, you can see I've got my files there. Now you can just drag and drop your file in there, which will pull it in as, let me just show you, pull it in like here, and this will pull it in as PySpark. So you can see, this will pull it in as a Spark data frame, which is slightly different from a Pandas data frame. But if you're using Spark, which you would use for big data, then you would use Spark. But I'm going to take you through a little bit of Pandas. So this takes us into Spark, and we can see here, and I think they've done a brilliant job with the help buttons that you can have there. So you can really, let's move that back. And I think if I press F11, I should get the whole screen. So it's now reading the data frame in, and it's waiting. And it's succeeded. And you can see in here now, we've got our whole table of data coming through. What we can also
and this
do,
was just reading the CSV file, right? It makes it work as a table in our Python code.
Yes, this is pulling in a table. So it's in that granular, in that tabular format. What you can also do is once you start pulling in a notebook, as you hover over the bottom, you've got 2 plus buttons. So we can add code in there. So I'm going to put it in as a Pandas data frame. So this is importing Pandas as a PD. So PD is just a name that we use. We don't have to type out Pandas all the time. And then we use our dot to pull out any methods that we might use with our Pandas. So if
stick with PD or something like that instead of making it PDF.
Yeah, stick with PD. Stick with PD. So basic Python is DF. DF is your first data frame. PD is Pandas. NumPy is NP, and Matplotlib is PLT. I think usually PLT.
Yeah.
So So you can see within here it's the same thing, but what we're actually using is we're using Pandas to pull this one in. But before I jump straight into Pandas, I'm going to give you just a little bit of a introduction to notebooks and a little bit of an introduction into Python as itself. So what I've done is I've created a Markdown. I don't know if you've used Markdown before, but Markdown is absolutely brilliant. It's a way that you can put text in between your code so that you can actually explain what's going on. You can put, you know, if you're working as a group, you can put comments to each other to check things out, and you can format it. So we can use in here, we can use the hashtags to set the level of hierarchy. We can use the double stars to do bold. We can have numbers in there. We can add text in there. And so you write it like this, but then when you print off your notebook, it'll come, or you view your notebook, it will be seen like this. So it gives you an idea to be able to actually be able to write text, which I think just makes our code so much easier to read, and also it allows us to be nice to ourselves, because you just want to remember to check this out, or if you're dealing with a customer, ask them the question, I'm not sure about this, why is it like this? So
sometimes I'll put to-dos in that, and
yeah,
and then before you wrap it all up, make sure all your to-dos are done. But
so in Power Query, I put lots of hashtags in steps that I want to remove. So first thing,
tell me you can document this right in line with the code, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
While you're building it. So.
Exactly. And you can, the Markdown, you can document it and it'll be visible, but you can also write comments in your code that aren't visible when you produce the notebook. So hashtag enables you to write a comment. When you're in the cell, enter allows you to enter data within the cell. Shift and enter makes the cell activate. So in normal programming, first thing we do a print hello world. So you can see the syntax there. We've got the print, open brackets, close brackets, and the print and the speech marks. So that straight away allows us to write comments and to actually to document and see the way that our code works. So the next thing, which I just found is quite useful, and I remember it took me for ages, is you can have this backsplash to allow you to escape special characters and to allow your code to print on a different line. And it's just little things like this that allows you to make your code a little bit nicer to read for those people that want to read it. So Markdown is an excellent tool to use, and I noticed with Shaban's presentation, she was saying that she's using it more and more. And so I've put a link here to the Seattle data guy. He's been putting out content for quite some time, but he's got a really nice series of text about actually how to use Notebook and to use it for documenting code. He's a data scientist in Seattle, I'm guessing. So that's, if you're interested in Markdown, I can recommend looking at this. So if we get into our basic program iteration, our if statements. So Python is it uses spaces. So if we do if 5 is greater than 2, you can see we've got our little colon there. And then the print, if we pull this back, we'll get an error. But it's great because it gives us the indentation error. It tells us what it is. And generally, we go for 4 spaces is the sort of the norm. So that allows us to actually do just our if statements, because that's the thing, they're all slightly different, aren't they, depending which language you use. So if we're going to use an if, we might want an else. So in Python, it's an if and then an else. So if 5 is greater than 2, print yes, else print no. So this is all quite sort of normal, but what we might want to start to do is actually to then start thinking about using variables. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Markdown in there for you. So here we have our variables. So we might want to create a variable, and there are some rules in Python about how we create variables. So I'll let you read that because you don't need me to read it for you. And the difference with Python is that you don't have to state your variable before you use it. You can just use it straight away without creating an instance of it. So here we can create our variables, just use them, and then we can print them in there. So straight away you can start to see how we're building up with our if then else, and none of this should be scary if we've been using BI or any other language. It all makes sense. So
Sue, Donald
yeah,
made a comment like, where's the semicolons and brackets, and kind of talking about some other languages.
yeah.
But are you going to also kind of cover how indentation, spacing, is important in
Yes,
Python?
as I go through, I'm going to go through some if statements and for
Yeah.
statements and show the blocks of code within it.
Great.
But yeah, I think this is why Python is quite a nice language to use, because it's a little bit more flexible than some of the other languages. So you don't need the sort of semicolons at the end and such like. It's a little bit more forgiving as a language.
Great.
Is that okay?
I thought
yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's I just wanted to read his comment. I know he said it a little bit tongue in cheek, but yeah, it's you read some other languages and all these other punctuation, I guess is the right thing, could kind of help confuse you. And I do like that with Python, right? But it does kind of get to me sometimes on the spacing and indentation and everything. So
yeah, it's not as long as there's a sorry, Chris, I can see you opening your mouth. I'll shut up.
Go on.
Speak.
You're the guest of honor. Just
yeah.
Yes. People hear enough of me.
Yeah, you know what I'm like though, Kevin. I'll go on forever. So,
love it.
Well, I was gonna say, I liked in other languages that you had to have semicolons to finish each little statement, and that you had to declare your variables so that you're purposeful and intentional in defining this is the variable, it's this data type.
Yeah.
So that you could go and see all the variables that you had instead of just like have these things randomly get declared as you move throughout your code. And I have found these nicer to use languages harder to support in the long run, but that is that is a losing battle. Everyone else has won on that one. I'm not fighting that battle.
And I think
for that one,
I think there is best practice as well. Just it's the same thing. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's much better if you put your variables at the top and you import your libraries in at the top and you write your code and you're purposeful. So, we can be very flexible, but it actually is much better and easier to read if we say what our variables are going to be at the start, we import our libraries in at the start, and we say what our code's going to do, and we keep our spacing so that it's 4 spaces, and it makes it so much nicer to read. And I think that's the thing with it being in cells. Each cell is individual, but when you import it into VS Code or something, it just reads it as a long script. So it's much better I think, to have that structure. Just because we can, it doesn't mean we should.
Right. Amen.
Yes. Amen. So on this then, we're starting to define our variables at the top, and we're creating our if statement. And note that it's an elif in Python. So it's not an if, else, then. In Python, it's an if, an elif, and our else. And you can see the indentations are actually setting them up with our colons there, our semicolons there. So again, it's nice and simple, and we can change our thresholds as we need to. So it's starting to become a little bit more structured. I do prefer it to be structured because it's easier to read then. So what we can do is we can now create a function. So we've written our code, but obviously we might want people to call our function and to put their own variables in there. So in Python, you do this by using def, and then you've got a space, name of the function. And again, it's a really nice way they've actually put the helpers as you hover over it, number and threshold. And you use these 3 speech marks here to comment out your code so you can explain what's happening. And then you can actually press it and then compare values. So it'll then tell us what whether it's right or not. So again, we could do it here. And you can see as you start typing, because I've declared it, and it's there. It's the telesense helps me. So it's quite a nice way to actually do it. So those are our if statements. What I want to go through now is a little bit of for statements. So this is taking us through, and you'll see this as we get into pandas that we use for quite a lot. So we're going to define a list of numbers, and we've got our square brackets here and our commas, and then we're going to use a for loop to iterate over the list. So it's for number and numbers. Number it doesn't have to be number. It could be for n in numbers or a or anything, but it just makes it easier to read. So for number and numbers, and that means it'll iterate throughout the list and pick out each value as it iterates through. And doubled is each number, so number there, times 2. And what we're going to do, I just want to show you this one, is we're going to print the string of number. So number is a number, is an integer, but we're going to print it as a string. Then we could concatenate it using a plus sign. Again, it would be nice if it was the same in all the languages, wouldn't it? But it's not. We use the plus sign, and then we've got our text, and then we're making doubled a string. So if we print it out, then we've got this.
Sue, yep. Jack asked a question. Do variables span code blocks?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Within one notebook, yes.
Provided you've run that code block
earlier,
right? Because I've come back in without kind of thinking and working on some code and then go in the middle of it and go, oh, well, this is where I left off, and I run it, and then it's like, hey, this isn't defined. So as you your code blocks, right, whatever was defined there is within the current, I don't know if session is the right word.
Yes. Or kernel.
Yeah. The same holds true for like how you defined your function.
Yeah.
Right.
So
once you've run that code block, it's available for everything else below it.
So you can see as I scroll up through here, it's got ticks, and you can see the output. So as we scroll through and the output is here, that means that the code is run, and it's stored the the variables. Mm-hmm. And in some of the other integrated development environments that you use, it will actually give you a list of all the variables that you've got stored, and the data frames you've got stored, and different things that you've got stored. But Kevin's absolutely right. You have to have run that line of code. So if you start at line 9 and run it from line 9, it won't have imported in any of the libraries if your libraries are in line 1. Mm-hmm. So you do, but you can stop the session and then run all. So you can, run above, run below. So there are different things that you can do. I just want to draw your attention to this. So here, this is called, it's called an F string, a format string. So it's basically a really quick way, and I think this is so clever, of see where the number is in the squarely brackets. What it's basically saying is you don't need to, I know this is a number, I know it's an integer, but because I've got that F and it's within the speech mark, I know to treat it as text. And this actually makes it so much quicker when it prints it off, because it doesn't have to convert it. You don't have to remember all of this. And it's just saying, for whatever type of object that this is, treat it as text. And it makes it so much quicker when you're actually then carrying out your code. So the output is the same, but it's just a lot nicer to use. Yeah, F strings. It's fairly recent, I think, those. But it's nice, isn't it? Just clean
F strings.
F strings. F strings.
Yeah, F strings.
Yeah. F strings. Are you being saucy?
Gonna avoid this now. Let's move on.
Let's move on quickly. It's only Friday morning for you guys. You can't get into the Friday afternoon lull yet. So we're moving on to while loops. You're not going to put me off. So we're going to create a nice little while counter here. So we're initializing a counter variable, and we're saying our count is 5. And while the counter is greater than 0, we're going to do our condition. So again, this is where your spacing is important, because these are within the while loop. So it's basically, while the counter is greater than 0, print countdown. And every time it iterates through this process, this counter minus equals 1 is the same as counter equals counter minus 1. So it just runs through each time and just takes 1 off until it gets to 0, because it's not greater than 0 then, and then it'll print, it comes out of the loop and prints lift off. So that's quite a nice little while loop in there. So there's a couple of ways that we can do while loops. We can do it until a condition is met, or we can do it until it reaches a condition and then tell it to stop. So this will loop indefinitely, and be careful with these because they can go on and on and on. So while it's true, number plus equals 1 is the same as number equals number plus 1. Print the number. When it reaches greater than 5, then stop. So again, it'll loop through, and then when it gets to 5, it then stops. So we've had our if statements, we've had our for statements, and now we've had a little bit of while logic. So the next thing to go on.
Can we just verify though? Like, the point of doing this is to learn how this functionality works.
Yeah.
Not that we'd want to be printing these things out inside of our notebooks, right?
No. This is purely come back to our mission statement at the beginning. This is purely just so that you can understand the basics of Python and how it works. Right. So you wouldn't want to do this, but there are some little hints and tips, because I think if you're going to use a language, it's always good to understand the structure of it.
I completely agree. And I was thinking, like, what would be a good example of one of these iterative statements and why you would use it?
I've got some coming up for you.
All right. Let's go.
Let's go. So we're doing a little bit of error testing, and then we're getting into libraries. So you'll see. So all right. I'll show you. So let's have an error, because if we're going to be a programmer, we need to think about errors as well, because our users aren't necessarily going to do what we think they're going to do. They can sometimes go off all over the place.
They think they'll never make errors.
Yeah, they think they don't. They're just like, well, you didn't think like that. And this is you can just put your code in ChatGPT and say, basically, what can go wrong here? And it'll help you, give you some errors. So on here, what they might say is, if the counter is not an integer and it's not non-negative, then it could go wrong. So we can have if not, we can start to raise some error statements here. So just a little bit about error statements in there. So you can say, well, counter equals 5. If I said counter equals Z, play, you can see it comes up with our error statement. So it's just a little bit of error statements coming in. So that is your basic Python programming constructs that allow you to understand the structure of Python and how it works. But the real beauty with Python is, when you understand those constructs, is how you then start to use your libraries. So within Python, we've got a display library, so we can import HTML. So from ipython.display, import display HTML. So we can start to then use them if we wanted to. I'm not saying you should, but you can actually start to then import in some HTML coding. And this is where, you can use Python for building apps and web browsing and all sorts of things other than data. But it just gives you an idea of some of the things that you can do. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get to our little data bit. Well, not so little. NumPy. So NumPy is basically, most of you all heard of NumPy. It's basically an efficient array handling library within Python. And it forms the backbone for pandas, which is a data frame, which is a tabular library, and the matplotlib, which is the visualization library, heavily relies on NumPy, because NumPy breaks down our data frames into series, which allows us to slice and dice and integrate. So it's basically the backbone. So what we're going to do here, and this is how most of your code will probably start. You're starting off small. So we're going to import pandas as PD. Again, it's just common terminology. We're going to import NumPy, and you might not see me actually refer to NumPy because pandas has got NumPy built into it. But there are some things that you might do with your code that instead of it being handled within the NumPy version of pandas, it might need the specific statistical part of NumPy, for example. So I just tend to, as a matter of course, pull them in like this. So we're going to create a little data frame called data using our curly brackets. So we have our key and we have our values here. So if I press play, what this does is this creates a data frame. So you can see here we've got a data frame weather, and I've made it into a data frame. So when you call it like this creates an object, but you actually have to specify that it's going to be a pandas data frame. And then once it's a pandas data frame, we can actually then start to do all of the things that you can do with pandas with it. So we could, for example, decide, right, okay, well, this is in centigrade. Perhaps we might want it in Fahrenheit. So this is where we start going into our data cleaning or our data transformations. So we might want to create another column with our square brackets. So again, we're calling the data frame. We've got our square brackets where it's temperature F. And then we're saying basically for that array, temperature centigrade, do this to it. So it's just maths. And then when we print off our data frame, you can see it's added to our data frame. And, you know, that's great, but what happens, what do we want to do with this? And obviously this is a really small little example, but what you could do is you might want to save it to a CSV. So within pandas, we can actually save to a CSV. So we're saving our, this is part of Python. We can actually save it straight to our CSV. And I'll show you at the end that we've got a CSV saved there, which will save these three things. So it's easy to be able to do these things. And so what we might want to do is we might want to actually filter our data based on a certain condition. So here, if the humidity is greater than 40 degrees centigrade, then that's all I want. I just want that data. So I'm creating a subset of my data. So if we look at our data, I just want these last two rows. So the way that it works is it calls out my data frame. And I'm then saying what I want is I'm creating this first set of brackets which specifies our filter context. So it's saying it has to be greater than 40. That column has to be greater than 40. And then the second set applies the Boolean mask to that data frame and then only selects those rows. So, and then if I create print, it will then create just those two rows. And our original data set is still intact. Our original data frame is still intact. So it's just creating a subset of our data. And this is when I said, different pieces of software will show you all of the objects that you've created within your code.
Hey, Sue, can we go back? I'm going to put a question on where you were writing the CSV file. How is that absolute path resolved? And it has to do with the lake house and the default lake house you have set. Right?
Yeah. It's because it's within the lake house. So it's defaulting to that lake house. Yeah.
And so those are just paths that are already kind of set up in your environment when you have a notebook in Fabric. And that's how it gets resolved out. Hopefully, and that answered your question.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that you could save this to another lake house.
Yes, you can. You have to use a little bit different nomenclature. You can't use
You
that
probably have to
relative.
use the ABFSS.
Right. You're
Yeah.
kind of expressing it fully out rather than here. You're just kind of giving this / lake house default.
Yeah, default. Yeah.
But because you could actually in your notebook you could have multiple lake houses kind of
Yeah.
reference there, but one is
Yeah.
set as the default. So
yeah, definitely, because that's the one we've pulled in. If you think of, that's the one we've pulled in from and attached our notebook to.
Right.
But that's that's the beauty of it, really. And what I want you to think about is, as I keep going through, I'm using DF, so it could be any piece of data that I'm pulling in. So the beauty of this is that your notebook can be used to carry out exploratory data analysis on any particular data frame. If it's called data frame, obviously with this, we've done something specific, but display data frame will it's part of pandas. It'll show us basically the display, the first 5 and the last 5 rows of our data and all of the columns. Now this would be the same for anything that you pull in. So you can have your exploratory data analysis notebook set up that you could run against any data frame you pull in from any particular piece of data. So it makes it extremely reusable. So in the same way here, we've got DF tail. What do you think DF tail is going to do?
Show tails.
Yes, show the last 10. So that's the last 10 rows. Or if we do df.head, that'll be, so tail is the bottom, head's the
Top.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I'm getting good at this. I might know Python soon.
Yay!
You just elevated a point.
Yeah, I'm going to a 3.
We're going to a 3. So we got head and tail. But you might want to get a sample. So
what?
So you can actually do, random rows, df.sample, n equals 5. And you could have that n to be anything. But just think, this is the same. It's just df, data frame, print the random rows. So you can just print a random selection of rows out, depending what your data, your exploratory data analysis wants you to do. So we can also get a concise summary. So this is quite cool. So this will actually go through and it'll just say, okay, these are all the columns. These are how many are non-null. So you can see I've got some nulls in there. This is the data type. This is a summary of the data types. This is a memory usage. And it just gives you, and it tells you what type of object that it is. So you might think, right, that's okay. And again, all of this, just DF. So once you bring it in, then you can have this one particular one particular notebook that then you can apply to any particular type of data. So this will create a descriptive statistics of each of your numerical columns within your data frame. So it'll tell me how many rows there are, what the average is. You can see all of these things. So you're getting a really good idea of your data just by creating these specific objects within pandas. It's a bit like I like it in Power Query when you have the things at the top and the bottom
or whatever.
Yeah, the profile.
Yeah,
I like that. But it's quite nice to be able to do this. So everything within pandas is an object. So we can hear here we've got columns, so we can print off our columns because our columns is an index within our data frame. So this gives us our columns. So we can actually say, well, give me a list of my columns, because sometimes it's quite handy, to go back to your customer and say, what did you say it was called that you wanted me to pull it out? Because it's not in there, and these are what you've got. And then they'll go, oh yeah, it should be this. So you can then print your column names out as a list. So you can see df dot, we're pulling our columns, dot to list. So we're appending different methods to our data frame. And again, it's a new thing, it's a new object. So I really like it because you're not altering your source data. So it's a way you can explore and you can see what's happening. So here we can sort, because that looks a bit rubbish. So we can actually sort our data. So again, we're using sorted, and we can have reverse equals true, so it's descending, or we can do reverse equals false. And interestingly, you can see it defines it by lowercase and uppercase. So you might think, well, and in pandas, in Python, we prefer not to have spaces in our columns, but obviously in Power Query, we prefer to put spaces in so that it makes it easy for our users. So you can do things where you can iterate through and you can capitalize. So we can do, this is where our for loop is coming in. So we're going to say name.capitalize for name in sorted columns. So this is my sorted columns. And then I'm going to print, but I want it sorted. So you can see how it then is printed. And we're able to pipe or just, append all of our different things in one go.
Hey, Sue, can I interrupt you with Jack's question? I think it's
Go
a pretty
on.
good one here. So, Chris, I don't know if you want to push shit up. Says,
Sure.
do you find that you're moving more to Python, than Power Query, right? Is it a better use case for Python? I'm going to throw the big "it depends" out here first, right, and then let you get into your answer.
Yeah, it's customer specific, Jack, I would say. Most of my customers don't necessarily use Fabric, so they might not be using Python. And actually, for me, when I came to Power BI, because I was using Python and R, and it was difficult to persuade customers to use Python or R because they would have to have Python or R on their machines. Whereas when I found Power Query, and I was like, oh my God, I can do all of this in the back end and I don't need Python or R. But there are some things that Python and R are really, really good at. Like I love R for text analysis. So I hate to use the "it depends," but depending upon the customer and depending upon the project need, depends upon the code that you can use. And I think,
and also maybe where the data lives, right?
And where the data lives.
Yeah. So let's say that you've already settled on the solution is Fabric, right?
Yeah.
So you have both data flows that are Power Query and Python available to you.
Yeah.
But only one of those could get the on-prem data, right? Then that's data flow. So, but I mean, I do find myself as I'm doing Fabric solutions that as I'm bringing data in the first time, if I could do it in Python, I do kind of prefer to bring it into Python first using notebooks and everything. But if I have to then go to a data flow because it's on-prem or it's something that I can't connect through with Python, or it's just easier, like if you go into a SharePoint list or something like that, the data flows are still, so that's kind of why, like you said, it's kind of, it depends on your requirements. It depends on your data, depends on maybe, like you said, if you're doing turnkey to a customer, what are they comfortable doing later?
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I mean, but that's the beauty, isn't it? I mean, you look at it, you can pull it in with Python, you can pull it in with data flow. So you've got your M code, you can, you can connect to a pipeline, you can do all sorts, and it's not just the customer, it's the skill set of the people that are going to be using it. So it's that entire flexibility. But for me to be able to use either or is just lovely.
Right. And Donald kind of took a different stance, right? He says that he's going to use Power Query unless you can't, which is fine, right? Again, and that could be an architectural decision, right? To say these are our preferred choices, right? Those are always something that you have to put together when you're putting your architecture together and come up with your reasons why. It could be this is what our this is what we've hired to, this is what we have the skill
Mm.
sets to, this is what we prefer.
Yeah.
Those are valid reasons. So
I do like with notebooks that you can just have a notebook. You can call anything in and call it DF and it'll just run.
Yep.
So and the libraries, I mean, I learned R because I wanted to do some recency and frequency and monetary analysis on a particular transactional client, and I couldn't do it in Python, and that might be my lack of knowledge, but there was a really nice library in R that that did all of that. So you know, it's the libraries which are the huge selling point of Python and R. And,
so I am going to say we want to have the most simple solution we can, right? Everything is going to be way too complex no matter what we do. So the more opportunities we have to simplify and reduce complexities, we should take them. To me, I have floated this out and caused some kerfuffle a while ago, but I said, the way I'm looking at it, and unless, and I'm going to let Alex Powers change my mind on this, but I'm starting to recommend and move away from Power Query as a guidance. Power Query is a mechanism to get data into your semantic models. But if we have access to SQL, which in Fabric we do, if we have access to Python and R and these other industry standard languages with millions of people who know how to use them, I would say we'd want to train and coach down that path and far less down a proprietary language that is completely and totally captured inside of Microsoft. So
yeah, I think I would say for your users, for enterprise users, that would be completely correct. However, there are so many smaller businesses that don't use Python, that don't use R, and haven't even got their heads around Power Query yet.
Yeah.
So for those users,
who do you want to try to hire if you're trying to find someone? Even if you're a small company, do you want to try and hire and always have to train on Power Query, or do you want to be able to hire and honestly, what kid coming out of college, even if you're in the business department, you learn Python. You might even have dabbled in SQL. Nobody's touched Power Query yet. So
yeah, but
that's my plug.
How much data is in old legacy spreadsheets? So much.
Yeah, but you don't need Power Query to get that data. That's just that's where the spreadsheet is, right? That's but that's a completely different live stream. We need to wrap this up. We're at the end of our time.
You're at the end of your time.
Yes. Susan, parting last words. What would you have? What are the next steps people should take? How could they reach you? What would you recommend to people?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. Parting words would be just be open to what's out there and learn. So it's so fabulous, isn't it? Just all this technology that we're just learning all the time. But no, reach out, chat to me. I'm just interested in the possibilities.
Awesome.
Yes, I love that.
Oh,
don't be
and
afraid.
I tell you what one thing you could do for me. So you haven't seen the whole session because I go into data frames and matplotlib. Is there anything I've got to deliver this at SQL Bits, a 100-minute session? Anything, any tips or thoughts that you think I could cover for the rest of it? So I'm finalising that this weekend. So I'd welcome any comments or thoughts on what to do.
Yeah. So if you have tips, tricks, or ideas on how Susan can improve it, hit her up on LinkedIn, let her know.
Yes.
And with that, we got to fly. It's been great, Susan. Kevin, we'll see you next week.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Have a lovely, lovely weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.